Charles Bronson.
Goodbye.
Death Wish 2.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about Death Wish 2 from 1982 and its 4K Blu-ray that came out from Vinegar Syndrome. But before we dive into all that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, then this is the channel for you. And nothing helps out this channel more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Death Wish 2 was released in 1982, 8 years after the original, this time again directed by Michael Winner. And again stars Charles Bronson as Paul Kersey, America's favorite vigilante. And this movie is very, 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 very similar to the first movie. It's structured almost identical, except this time it doesn't take place in cold New York. It takes place in hot and sunny Los Angeles, and this time when Paul Kersey is out there fighting crime, he's wearing a hat now. So there's some big differences there in the two films. Now this was a request from a lot of people after I did my original review of the 4K for the original Death Wish. And I had said I'd never seen Death Wish 2, and you know, I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Death Wish. I enjoyed it, I thought it was good. You know, I'm just not the biggest Charles Bronson guy. He doesn't really do it for me. You know, I mean, I think one of my favorite westerns of all time is Once Upon a Time in the West, and I think that's by far his best performance. But, you know, the rest of his movies, especially the 70s and 80s when he transitioned into this big action star, those movies just don't really do it for me, and I really did enjoy the original Death Wish, even if I didn't love it like most people do. I thought that was definitely in line with a really good 70s story that had a good theme to it, and especially in the sense of people who grew up in New York know about New York. In the 70s, you know, New York was just a hard place to live. The city itself was filled with crime, and that's what that movie was really talking about, how overwhelmed the cops were, and that they just let crime run amok. And Paul Kersey's character has to take it into his own hands. He has to be the one that saves the city. He's going to get his revenge while also saving the city. That's why in the first movie, the actual people who raped and killed his wife and raped his daughter, they're not the ones who get the revenge. It's the city itself, the criminals, because really it's the city that has caused this rise of crime. But this time, not only do we almost start out the exact same way, this time he's getting his revenge. Because we open up pretty much identical to the first one. Somehow, a group of thugs, which includes, by the way, a young Lawrence Fishburne, because, hey, I'm always going to bring up Lawrence Fishburne whenever we can. He's one of the most, actually, I've said it before, he is the most underrated actor. Now, he doesn't really have a big part in this movie. He just goes by the name Cutter, and I think in the credits, he was credited as Larry Fishburne III. So this is really young. It's still after Apocalypse Now, so it's not his first movie. But it's just pretty cool that in the first Death Wish, we had Jeff Goldblum, and in this one, we have Larry Fishburne. And those two would end up teaming up in 1992 for one of my personal favorite noir stories, one of my favorite crime films in Deep Cover, directed by Bill Duke. So if you haven't seen that one, this is a cheap plug for it, because I think it's a phenomenal movie and just one of my favorites ever.
They don't have barbecue jumbo shrimp! You motherfucker! Get
back in the fucking car, David!
It's just funny that they both pop up in Death Wish movies. In this film, this group of thugs breaks into his house because they stole his wallet he was going to get ice cream. They're just pieces of shit, so they're not really, you know, there's no character development there. They're just assholes to be assholes. So they steal his wallet, they got his license, because he seemed like, you know, he was going to beat the shit out of one of them. So like, you know what? I know what we're going to do. So they went to his house, and they raped his housekeeper, and then when he comes home with his daughter, he gets knocked out. They take his daughter back to a warehouse. They attempt to rape her, but she escapes, jumps out a window because she thinks she can just leap that far, and she lands right on a spike fence super violently, and she dies. And now Paul is pissed. Not only is his housekeeper dead and his house is going to be a mess, but now his daughter is dead as well. So he's done this before. He's got to do it again. And this movie is basically the exact same film as the first one. Except now we don't get that build up to him, you know, using the gun because he's already been trained to use the gun. So we don't have that confliction that he had in the first one. This time that's it. This is an action movie. This is very similar to what happened with First Blood and Rambo 2. They took the original film, which was actually trying to have a message to it that was more serious, down to earth, something that could really happen, talking about how America is at the time, and they just turned it into a full-fledged action franchise, because that's what this movie is. It's just a full-fledged revenge tale. It's an action movie. It's a good action movie at that. It's not like the action itself is bad. The acting in this movie, other than Charles Bronson, is not good. Everybody is just kind of seems like they're trying, but it's not the greatest. I didn't really enjoy the acting. The only thing I could say in this movie that is better than the first movie is the score. And people did say Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin did the score of this, and it was much better than the first one, because I felt like the first one was just very 70s influenced. And the score is way better. It definitely suits the tone of the movie more. But they still use this melodramatic score in some scenes, especially like this girl he's dating at his architecture firm. She's like walking up to the house, and right after a violent scene, they'll just kick in this like very soft melodramatic score. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I don't think they're understanding how tones work. So that was that could be very jarring. And I just felt like this movie feels very much more like a B movie, whereas the first one feels like an A movie. So that's why the Vinegar Syndrome 4K for this makes a lot of sense if you're into those down and dirty, gritty action movies from the early 80s. This is definitely for you. I'm not a particular fan of those kinds of movies. You know, this one would be one that if I hadn't been requested to watch it, I probably would have gave it a skip, because I didn't really enjoy my time too much with it. You know, I appreciated some of the stuff that I saw, but it was just hard to look past the fact that this is just basically a retelling of the first movie, except this time he actually gets his revenge on the people who did the rape and murders. And the rape scene in general, like, I don't understand why we needed it to be that long. Like, I get it. It happened. I mean, it's violent, it's brutal, you know, 1 or 2 minutes in and out, we get the message. I didn't need them to linger and just show how violent. I mean, I guess that's what they want us to do, is to be disgusted and feel uncomfortable. But man, they linger on that for way too much, in my opinion. Now, this is the unrated cut that I watched, so maybe it was cut out of the theatrical cut a little bit, but yeah, I mean, that was tough. I didn't have a timer going, but it felt pretty damn long, so that was one thing I had a big complaint about. And just because this movie's not that long, for that one scene to be that long, I felt like that was the only time this movie kind of slowed down at its pacing, because it's definitely paced a little bit faster than the first movie, but I just don't think as a film it stands up or even really gets even close to the original Death Wish. And like I said, the original Death Wish isn't one of my personal favorite movies, but it's still a pretty damn good movie. And Death Wish 2 just feels like something you're going to forget in a day or two, and it's nothing special. The only thing in here that I think is better than the first one is that score. Other than that, I don't think you need to watch. I think you can give it a skip if you've never seen it. Now, this did end up getting more sequels and a remake, so there are fans of this franchise, and I don't want to insult them by saying that I didn't enjoy it, but you know, I gotta be honest, it just wasn't a film for me. It was a little bit too ridiculous for me to buy into. And I mean, I guess that's the point, but it just didn't hit for me like I really was hoping it would. But we're also here today to talk about its 4K that came out from Vinegar Syndrome.
One man will, his way.
So Vinegar Syndrome puts out some of the nicest 4Ks I have ever seen, and starting right off with their packaging. So right here you get the nice slipcover. Vinegar Syndrome slipcovers are all pretty much the same, but they are top shelf, some of the best paper stock you can get. You get this matte finish, and then the font is always usually raised, so that's like a glossy white finish with a raised font, so if you run your fingers across it, you could feel it. It's the same thing on the side. And then Bronson's loose again on the back. You pop it open. You'll notice that it's different artwork underneath, and this art is reversible, so you can have it, reverse it, and it will look like this. I'm choosing to keep it like this because, hey, it's the original movie poster, and I already have this artwork, so I get them both. But I guess if you don't get the slipcover, you can reverse it to whichever one you want. But I got the slipcover, and yeah, I'm going to keep this one, so every time I pull it off, it'll look like this. On the back, you get your stats. You pop it open, and again, Vinegar Syndrome just always caters to the collector. Individual disc design, that is awesome. I will never not praise a company that's here to help the collector and give them more, give them all the bells and whistles, and that's what Vinegar Syndrome really does. They really just concentrate so much on their packaging. You know, they have the real collector sets like Roadhouse or Cloak and Dagger. Like, those are some of their best. That's their top shelf stuff. We only get a few of those a year. But for this to be their standard with their standard slipcover, with the individual disc design, amazing packaging. And another thing that Vinegar Syndrome, I always point out, is really good at is their extras. And this time I was actually a little bit disappointed with the extras. There's really just a few interviews on there, a commentary track, and that's all going to be on that second Blu-ray. And there is also actually a TV version that's on the second Blu-ray as well. So if you want to watch the TV version, which, you know, those could always be fun. They change the lines around and everything like that. And I've also heard that the Waterworld TV version, which I will get my hands on pretty damn soon with that new 4K coming out, is the preferred version. So I didn't check that out. I just made sure it ran, which actually brings me to a point. The menus on these 4K and the Blu-ray are, well, actually it's mainly the Blu-ray. It was just very sluggish and slow. Took a while to load. You know, usually those things run pretty smooth, but I actually noticed it not running the cleanest. And for me to point that out means it was definitely running pretty bad, because, you know, who really thinks about the menu system? But it was noticeably weak to me, just the fact that it would load almost any time you hit a button on your remote. Like if you were going to change your languages, it would go to a different screen. It would take a while to load into it. So it was really sluggish to get through the menu system. So that's one thing that I thought was really strange. And then again, like, just not the greatest of extras. You do get a commentary track. You get that extra cut of it. And just remember that it's not going to be when you go to play the movie. If you want that TV cut, it's actually just going to be in your bonuses. So you have to go over there if you want to watch that cut. And that's going to be there with all the interviews and, you know, the trailers and everything like that. But I would have loved a looking back documentary. You know, that's always what I prefer in the extras. And usually Vinegar Syndrome includes that. They usually are the king of the extras, you know, right up there with Criterion as far as extras go. But this one, I don't know, maybe they just didn't have access to as much as they usually do, but I definitely felt like this was one of the weaker Vinegar Syndrome releases as far as extras go. But you know what? That all could be erased for a good quality disc, and damn, it is a beautiful 4K disc. Now, I thought this disc was better than the original Death Wish. Now, given the original Death Wish came out in 1974, this film came out in 1982, that's 8 years. You know, this movie had an $8 million budget. Actually ended up doubling that budget. That's probably why we got more films, because the box office receipts were pretty damn good on it. So, you know, I mean, even if I didn't really enjoy the franchise, clearly more people did, so that they ended up making more Death Wish movies. So if you're a fan, you got lucky with this. But this 4K itself, even though I'm not a huge fan of the movie, just like all the other Vinegar Syndrome 4Ks, what an amazing transfer. It doesn't have Dolby Vision, but it does have HDR10. And I really think that's all it needed. This movie was crisp and clear. The colors popped off your screen. You know, the blacks were deep. And there is a Blu-ray in here to compare it to. So you have that compressed 1080p Blu-ray. And it was noticeably brighter than that Blu-ray. The grain balance on the 4K, you didn't really notice it that much. I mean, it was there, but it was never anything to take you out of it. On the Blu-ray, it becomes a little bit more noticeable, but that's where the HDR is going to kick in. You know, the blacks are going to become deeper on the 4K compared to that Blu-ray. But that Blu-ray really isn't that bad. You know, you can't really say it's a weak Blu-ray. And, you know, for a movie like this, I imagine that the VHSs and the DVDs in the past were probably not the greatest. But this 4K will stand out in the crowd. I mean, it stands out even in Vinegar Syndrome's catalog. It's a beautiful looking 4K visually. Everything looked good. The skin tones look good. You know, this movie takes place in the early 80s, so you're going to have some vibrant colors. One of the characters is wearing pink sunglasses, and that's going to pop off your screen, especially when you watch that back to back with the Blu-ray. You know, those sunglasses are noticeable, but your eyes won't get drawn to it like they do on the 4K. The 4K really helps to make everything just stand out, become crisper. Obviously, the 4K resolution, so you're going to get an increase in that, so the level of detail definitely increases. Everything becomes more vivid, but you know, the HDR really just, that's doing a lot of the work, and it does a phenomenal job on here. Now, as far as the audio goes, you're only going to get a DTS Master Audio 2.0. I've noticed also with Vinegar Syndrome, they like to really use like whatever the original tracks are or whatever the previous tracks are. You know, we don't ever seem to get any Dolby audio from them. Or Dolby Vision. So I don't know if they just have a thing with Dolby and they prefer to use DTS, or it's some kind of rights thing. I'm not too sure. But I've always noticed that Vinegar Syndrome doesn't really do the biggest of upgrades to their audio. Now, is it necessary? No, it's a 1982 film. As long as you got 2-channel audio, so everything is still pretty damn crisp and clear. It's not like anything is being overwhelmed. It's not like the dialogue is being drowned out or anything. Everything is crisp and clear. I set the volume I wanted to watch the movie at, and it was fine throughout. I have no complaints. Obviously, I would have liked maybe a 5.1 on this. This is an action-heavy movie. It's one of the earlier, you know, where we really started to lean into the 80s action that the 80s would probably become known for. You know, this is kind of like at the beginning of that, so there is plenty of gunfire through this, so a nice 5.1 would have been appreciated, but that's not what we got, and I can honestly say that the 2.0 on here, it's not bad. It's just nothing that's going to blow you away. It's nothing that you're going to sit there and go, wow, that was good. It's just going to be pretty damn standard at that. But overall, I thought that this was a pretty damn good release from Vinegar Syndrome, as they always do. You know, would I have liked to enjoy the film more? Absolutely. You know, it was 91 minutes, I believe, the uncut version. And, you know, for the most part, I was like, oh, it's all right. Like, I was just paying attention, but I wasn't really feeling any enjoyment. I never got any kind of a rush of emotion from it. Like I said, the only thing that I felt that was a little bit better than the first one was the score. And, you know, Jimmy Page is Jimmy Page. That worked, but everything else felt like it was a step down. But the 4K itself really is great. I can't say too many bad things about it. I would have liked more extras. I would have liked the 5.1 audio track at the very least, but you know what? Minor complaints. You get beautiful packaging, you get beautiful visuals. The audio is at least still pretty damn good, and even if the extras aren't the greatest, the extras that are on here are still pretty good. And you get that TV version if you're into that, so that's something that's a little bit of a bonus if you're a fan. So overall, I still can give this a really solid 8 out of 10. I'm very happy with my purchase. I'm glad that I have this just because it'll look nice on my shelf. I'm sure down the line I will revisit it again because I'll probably get that itch like, do I remember not liking this movie? Even though this is on the internet, I can just go back and check. Or, you know, opinions change. Maybe in 5 years, my opinion of this movie will change and I'll want to see it again. And I'll get more enjoyment out of it. You never know. That's the thing with time, we all change. But some things do stay the same, and one thing that's staying the same is that it's Friday, and that means it's time for our digital code giveaway. So if you just happen to tune in for the Death Wish 2 4K Blu-ray review from Vinegar Syndrome and you're wondering what the hell is a digital code giveaway? Well, on Friday's video, either Matt or I will ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one of those digital code giveaway questions in the comment section below. As long as you do, we put your name on a magic wheel on Monday's video. We spin that bad boy 2 times. The 2 names that it lands on are this week's 2 lucky winners of the giveaway, and they have their choice of the digital codes that you have seen on your screen before you today. And as long as the other winner doesn't take that code is all yours. And what are this week's 2 digital code giveaway questions? Well, I figured, hey, we're over here talking about 80s action. I figured I'd ask you guys, what is your favorite 80s action movie? I think I've asked that question before, but it bears worth repeating. We've gotten some new people into the digital code giveaway, and I would like to hear what they think of the 80s action scene. Obviously, Matt and I are huge Terminator fans, so that would probably be the choice, even though I don't really consider that an action movie. So if I was going pure action, me purely, personally, what would I choose for the best 80s action movie? I'm just going to still stick with Arnold just because that's what I do, and probably go with Commando. That's just your straightforward action movie, and you're probably thinking to yourself right now, dude, didn't you just take a shit on Death Wish 2 and you're going to pick Commando, which is another cheesy action movie? And the answer is, well, Arnold's better than Charles Bronson. Maybe not as an actor, but as an action star. Hear me out. And I'm also going to ask you guys, what is your favorite decade for cinema? So that could be any decade. Maybe you're a fan of 1920s cinema. Maybe you're a fan of 1950s cinema. And I was thinking, whenever one wins this part of the giveaway, I'll make a video of what my top 5 favorite films from that decade are. So whatever wins, down the line, I'll make a video about it. Decade of film. And, I'll probably end up doing them all down the line whenever we need some new videos, because I love making lists. I don't know if I've ever told you guys that, but that when we started the channel, I couldn't wait to make lists. I'm just a huge fan of making lists. I know a lot of people say it's really tough to pick one, and it is, but it's just fun making lists. Anyway, I'll keep rambling on, so make sure you guys answer one of those digital code giveaway questions in the comment section below, and don't forget to come back to Monday's video so we can find out who this week's 2 lucky winners are. And while you're down there, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And then if you feel like it, we do have podcasts now. You can always watch those on video here on YouTube, but if you want to just listen to the audio in the car or at the gym, search for us on all podcast services. Maybe give us a 5-star rating, because that really does help Apple to keep pushing us. But really, nothing helps out this channel more than just by you simply going out and telling all your friends about us and just enjoying your weekend. And we'll be seeing you around.